Hello and welcome back to another Sip Around and Find Out. And today, I think I'm going to do a longer video today. Had a request a while ago and been trying to get some research done because I honestly didn't know some of the questions that were asked. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a longer video. Not going to be a short, that's for sure. But we're going to talk about kind of the history of where whiskey started, or where we think whiskey started, because, well, we don't exactly have a paper trail. So go ahead and get comfortable. Get something to sip on if you can. Oop. A little bit too far over on that, but get something to sip on. Get comfortable. Relax. Or if you're trying to sleep, this might be a good video to fall asleep to. Who knows? We'll find out. But anywho, so what we do know is that distillation and alcohol production is largely credited to the Egyptians, the Romans, and the Greeks. Now, coming out of that time period of ancient civilizations, there was the Roman Empire. So the Roman Empire, much like the Greeks and the Egyptians, they all had their height of influence in parts of the world they traveled to, trading routes, etc. And a lot of that is the early spread of distillation practices, methods, which once Rome got into Europe, that's where a lot of distillation practices started showing up, mostly through monasteries with the monks, with their brewing of beer, if you will. Further down the road, we get our first actual documented, on paper, if you will, documentation of whiskey, which appeared in Scotland in 1494 in a letter to another monk. I forgot what the guy's name was, but it was in the reference of the water of life, or aqua vita. And then further down from that, we have the first documented distillery in Ireland in 1608, which was Bushmills, or is Bushmills. They're still around today. Then to America, we had immigration from the Irish and the Scottish, and that's where we see distillation in America taking off, mostly from them bringing their distillation practices and then using local grains and water sources, which created rye and bourbon whiskeys. We'll go back a little bit there. So in 1823 in the United Kingdom, there was an Excise Act of 1823. Very creative of them on that part. And the sole aim was to regulate the production and taxation of distilled spirits, or whiskey. My personal belief, something that came from the government, it's probably mostly about collecting tax dollars than really regulating too much. But there was regulation that came in with it. Now, during this period, which is also interesting, a byproduct of this regulation and taxation was you see regional influences really starting to take shape, and the differences between those regions that are starting to really emerge and distinguish themselves. And in the Scottish regions, there's 5 officially recognized regions. There's the Speyside, which is along the River Spey, which is kind of northeastern, middle northeastern Scotland. Scotland's a very interesting shaped country. It's kind of hard to look at it and say, well, that's north, that's northeastern, that's central, etc. But there's a River Spey. Speyside is that region, and it's on the northeast of where that river goes in Scotland. Then you have the Highlands, which is the northern and probably the larger area of Scotland. Then you have the Isla, which is on the west coast, and the islands out there, which some of those islands are claiming to have their own region, which is understandable considering they have different profiles that come out of their whiskeys. Then there's the lowlands and Campbelltown, which, if anybody that is into Scotch whiskey at all, very familiar with Campbelltown. Speyside, that's personally one of my favorites. I either like Speyside or like the Highlands on Scotch whiskey, but that's just for my palate. The Speyside region typically has very elegant, very fruity tasting notes. Some do have a light peach smoke, but not a whole lot of them, and the vast majority of them mature in sherry casks. To me, the most notable distilleries that are coming out of Speyside are Aberlour and Balvenie. And then there's Craigellachie, that's also out there. Let's see, what else do we say? Highlands. I gotta get my notes here. So in the Highland region, that's very diverse. So the southern side or the southern area of the Highlands will have a light and floral kind of tasting notes. And then the further north into the Highlands, you get a bold, a spicier tasting note. And the distilleries that I think of when I think of Highlands that come to mind, and mind you, the Highlands is probably, it's either tied for my favorite or it's very close second, is Dalmore and Macallan. And then honorable mention to Glenmorangie, very, very good Scotch whiskey. I guess not really an honorable mention. I like all three of them. They have different complexities, different tasting notes. They're definitely not like each other at all. If you did them in a blind and didn't know what you're tasting, you would definitely taste three different whiskeys. Then we get into the Isla region, which is the coastal region on the west side of Scotland. And these are, the next three I don't really care for, just based off of my palate. And mostly it's because they're briny, they're peaty, like Isla Scotch whiskeys. It's very heavy peat smoke, briny, just unforgiving, punch you in your palate, open the bottle and you're smelling it right away. When I think of Isla, Ardbeg really comes to mind. Just heavy peat smoke, very earthy. But if that's the type of Scotch you like, that's the type of Scotch you like. The Lowlands is a little bit lighter. It's grassy, floral tasting notes. There are some that would recommend that if you wanted to get into Scotch, to look for a Lowland Scotch whiskey. I think it's a good beginner Scotch. I don't really care for the grassy and that lighter complexity. So I would almost steer someone towards an Aberlour or a Speyside, but I'm also partial to those tasting notes. I think those are much more desirable to me. And last but not least is the Campbelltown region. Campbelltown is very interesting to me. Historically, it was the whiskey capital of the world for quite a while. Till there was, I guess you could say, a collapse in the whiskey economy, if you will. Went from having a lot of distilleries, now there's not so many. But the distilleries that are still there, like Springbank, very popular, very sought after. Tasting notes that you can get out of the Campbelltown whiskeys include smoke, salt, fruit, and toffee. They're going to be very robust and heavy flavors. They're not going to be faint. They're not going to be light and dainty. They're going to be heavy. It's going to be meaty. You're going to be tasting it. But that's just my little ramble for today. Hope you found this interesting. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, drink responsibly, and I'll see you in the next long video of me yammering away about nothing or a short video doing a review. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.